What's going on, everybody? It's time to learn how to play one of the originals. Now, this is a song I wrote with an awesome singer-writer, Gracie Cespedes, that we did for Blues Week, which I did on my channel, which I'm just kind of wrapping up right now. And basically, it can be thought of as an interesting example of some alternative things you can do with like a 12-bar blues pattern, right? So if you haven't seen the video, definitely watch that first and get into this. But I'm going to teach you how to play it. It's basically two parts. We're going to learn the chords, and then I'm going to actually kind of run down how I recorded it and mixed it too, because some of you said you were interested. So we're going to get going right now with this E minor 7 voicing. And basically, I'm kind of... The telly has a little bit more bass on it than I usually would, just because it was kind of like a one guitar vocal performance. So what's kind of going on is this voicing right here. But I'm thinking of the root note, right, as the actual low E string opens. So that's what's kind of responsible for getting that like... that kind of sound, which kind of fills it out, getting that kind of really just hammering home on this open E string thing, right? So basically, there's the voicing right there. Pointer finger is barring kind of 7, starting at the A string and making a power chord. It's basically an E minor voicing without your pinky. So there's the E minor 7, right? And if you watched the tutorial I gave on hand positioning, kind of how I play fingerstyle wise, I'm just having my thumb go back and forth between the E and the A string, and then my index, middle, and ring finger assigned to D, G, and B, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm gonna play 4 bars. Traditionally the 4-bar or the 12-bar blues, the first 4 bars is the same chord. So I'm thinking of like this E minor is kind of the 1, right? So it's 1. So it's kind of the pulse of it, right? I'm hitting the low E string, and that's kind of sustained, and then I'm starting it off with like a hammer on, kind of barring the 7th fret and hammering on that chord. It's almost kind of like a reggae groove if you slow it down really slow. So root, chord, and hammer, root, chord, and chord, root, chord, and hammer, root, chord, and chord. All right, so usually we'd have 4 of these. But what I'm doing to kind of make it a little more interesting, to me at least, instead of just kind of like doing the same 4 of bar 1, 2 of 2, or whatever, we're starting here, 1. Then I'm going to go into these voicings. These are just minor 6 chord voicings. So if you go to like the 4 and the 5, usually you would go to like maybe like an A minor chord and then a B minor chord for your next part of the 12-bar blues. But I'm just using my knowledge of chord voicings. I thought maybe it'd be cool to start with the minor 6 chord right here. So middle finger 5 E, there's my root note, there's the A. Pointer finger 4 D, ring finger 5 G, pinky 5 B. And sometimes I'm kind of doing this little, which is kind of like a fingerstyle thing where I'm almost kind of like going one thing at a time. If you see my hand, it's kind of coming off almost like I'm pulling a sticker off, right? Sometimes it's just A minor 6, B minor 6. Other times it'll be kind of like a... because I'm incapable of playing the same thing twice for whatever reason in a row, right? So we've got the E minor, A minor 6, B minor 6, back to the E, right? So each one of those times can be considered kind of like one time around on the 12-bar blues. So as most 12-bar blues go, then we're going to go to like the 4 chord, or however you want to look at it. I'm thinking of it as going to the A, right? So I'm going to do the same thing where I end that phrase and then go back to the A. And then I take that 2 times, 2 bars full, and then back to the E. And then, as we know, if you watch the blues video, which I'll link to below, how the 12-bar blues is sequenced, which if you haven't watched that, definitely watch that because that's going to be really helpful in explaining this. I'm going to stay on the 5, which is the B, for 1 bar, to the 4 for a bar, and then back to the 1. So you can almost kind of think of this little A to B thing in E minor's part as kind of a turnaround. I don't know. I mean, it's not like the most creative, crazy thing in the world, but it is maybe a somewhat non-traditional way to look at sprucing up those 4 bars, however you want to look at it, right? So that's kind of the main sequence of the song, and then we kind of go to a different part, which my philosophy on using blues structure in songwriting to kind of spice it up a little bit is to make something your own, whatever it is, even if it's just a little riff inside one of the chords or just changing the chords one way around. I think it's important to try to bring something fresh to any 12-bar blues composition, right? And whatever, there are different views. I'm not saying this is like the greatest song in the world or whatever, but I was just kind of using my ears like, okay, I knew I wanted to go somewhere else, but I wanted to keep the same tone. So I decided on this voicing right here. And if you've seen the other ones, this is kind of like an A9 voicing, right? So it's the octave A, 12A with my middle finger, back and front 11D index, ring finger 12G, and pinky 12B. And it's the same thing. And then I slid all the way down into here. Now, what this is, at the time I had no idea what this is. And this is kind of a good example of just songwriting, how knowing theory and stuff is great. It's a great tool, but at the end of the day, you want to follow your ears. I've never even used this chord voicing before. Still not even sure what it is. I guess I would call this like a C with a major third and a major 7. So I guess this would be like a C major 7 type voicing. I've got my middle finger on the C on the A string, which is 15A, pointer finger 14. There's a 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm a sucker for major 7 chords in any context. And then my pinky down here on this high E, which is the, 17th fret of the B string, right? So I had no prior experience with this chord. I was just kind of trying different chord voicings out until I found something that I thought added some tension and doesn't really belong in the key, or however you want to look at it, but this is what I decided on. So whether that's cool or not, I don't know. I liked it. Is this an example of how I'm not even using a lick of theory to find these next chords, but I'm just using the context of chord voicings I know and just kind of using my ear, finding different tones that I want until I land on something that I think is cool, right? So we've got this A9 to this C. So we're kind of going back home a little bit, which is the E minor. This is the E minor 7 voicing. A higher one that's easier to get to from here instead of this. Again, same chord, just a different voicing, right? And then we're going to this E flat half diminished, or E flat minor 7 flat 5, however you want to look at it. Again, another chord I'm always a sucker for. And it is kind of a jump to get from here to here. And I realized there's another voicing that might have worked here, but to me it's easier to get from here to here than here to here, which seems kind of backwards, but that's just, you know, we wrote this song in like 20 minutes, so I was just kind of more comfortable jumping back here. So anyways, these 4 chords, right? We've got this A9 to the C major 7 to E minor 7 to E flat half diminished, right? And we do that 2 times. And the second time it goes around, we got to get back to the main thing, right? So how are we going to make our way back to the original? So basically, I'm just taking this chord and I'm going to walk it all the way through a scale thing. So what my ears are telling me to do is go from here to here to here to here, back home to the original thing that I can just ride out, right? So I'm just taking those root notes, but I'm gonna put a chord on each one of them, right? So I start with the half diminished. I know I gotta get to this 6th fret. So I'm not even thinking chord-wise what I wanna put here. I just know I'm gonna change my root note, and I ended up with this, right? So into the 9th fret of the A string, 10 to the E. So it's kind of leading the ear through this back to the main groove, right? So those are all the chords for the song and kind of like the groove in which it's played. So hey, try it out. It's cool because it's kind of, you're moving all over the neck. For me, it was a fun song to play. But I also want to talk a little bit about the guitar solo for the song, right? It's a very ethereal thing, and the way I actually recorded it, the way I recorded the whole thing is we had Gracie singing on a Shure Sm7B, which is going into universal audio preamp. I picked that microphone because it's a very directional thing and it doesn't get a lot of extra noise, like ambient noise. And with the guitar turned up fairly loud to kind of hear it, I wanted something kind of focused in on her so I could adjust the levels afterwards, because I was miking up my Mesa Boogie cab with an Audix i5, which I think is an awesome microphone, relatively inexpensive, that does a great job. Also into a different universal audio preamp. And again, it was just the Mesa on a clean channel with a lot of reverb. So the actual original guitar channel is not affected at all. And her vocal is only, the only thing we didn't, I think it was compressed on the way in through the Universal Audio 6176. And I just put like a Native Instruments RC24 reverb on it. That's all that's on her vocal. And there's nothing extra plug-in wise on the guitar. But the solo guitar, which was played with a Strat, which I'm just gonna do it on the telly, had a lot of processing after the fact. So I still recorded it clean through the amp with the same microphone and everything, just because I didn't feel like unpacking my pedal board, which is just a huge, it's like the biggest chore in the world for me for whatever reason. So I just recorded it clean into Logic, which is what I use, the old version of Logic, so I'm sure people will make fun of me for that, but whatever. Into some plugins, which I'm gonna show you. I'll put a screenshot out. Basically, I like Native Instruments plugins a lot. Guitar Rig is a really cool thing because they have just like an infinite amount of options. So once you find stuff that you like, you can put it on there and get like cool sound. So what this guitar solo has on it is a psych delay. It has a delay and a reverb called Iceverb in addition to the reverb that was on the amp. The Iceverb plugin is like my favorite reverb that Native Instruments has for a lot of like ethereal sounding type stuff. So basically, we're in E minor, right? So what's the most natural place to go is the E minor pentatonic scale. And actually, personally, for me, I don't really think in pentatonics as much. I kind of think in full minor scale mode, whatever, however you want to look at that. I'm kind of mimicking what Gracie was singing with like this. So again, you can find all these notes in the minor scale, right? I'm sliding from here, 14D, to 12G, back to 14. So 14, 12, 14, 14G, walk it back to 12, 11, slide from 12 to 14. And then I'm just on the D string, 14, 14, 14, 12, 14. All right, and then, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I was doing at the time, but afterwards I'm kind of adding like this kind of like, I guess I'm just kind of filling a little bit more space with the ambient nature. If you're into ambient stuff, it's always kind of good to have maybe a little bit of like dynamics where you have something softer playing against the lead line, in just my opinion, right? So I'm kind of making a chord like this. And you can hear a little bit of this chord in between each line. So the chord is 14D, 12G, pinky, 15B. So, and then softer. So again, I'm still in the same scale. Starts the same way. I'm gonna kind of go out of the shape 2 frets. And again, I could go. But I like that slide, especially with so much like the reverb on it. I like that kind of sliding effect, right? And then the last time to kind of finish that out, I'm kind of rising. I'm getting a little higher with each phrase, which kind of gives the impression that solo's maybe going somewhere. That's just kind of how I like to think of it. So now I'm sliding into that position, right? Now my ring finger is on 16G, which I know I can go to 15, 17B. So it's relatively simple. You know, you could use this in a pentatonic way. You could say it's the minor scale, however you want to look at it. I'm just thinking of scales and connecting them. And then at the very end, towards the fade out, I'm just kind of going through these notes to kind of collect them, right? Now this is kind of a cool little thing. I mean, this isn't really in the song, but something that helped me out. I think maybe a lot of you have heard the term pentatonic boxes. This is a good example of that. It's just 10, 12, 10, 12 on E and A, sliding down into the same thing. So we have like a box here and a box here. So it's kind of a good thing to kind of practice. Anyways, that's basically it. The processing of the mix, I kind of just used a real simple thing. I had, like I said, the individual tracks. I just had the reverb on Gracie's voice, and then going through the Guitar Rig plugin for the solo part. And then on the whole mix, I generally put like the Native Instruments solid bus compressor, the passive EQ, which is like a cool plugin that gives you it just kind of opens up a mix if it's, you know, not used too drastically. And then just to kind of get the level right, I had one of the Waves L3 plugins, which just kind of gets the loudness up without, you know, cranking it up too much. So that's basically it. I hope you like the track, and if you have any questions, please let me know.